I also chose to do the empathy interview, and I interviewed my grandfather. My topic is kind of the parallels of racism between what he experienced growing up as a Latino in Los Angeles and the comparisons to the things that we're seeing today. So here's a picture of us. This is my grandfather, Gene Villalobos. He was born at the end of the Great Depression and during World War II in 1939 in Los Angeles at the General Hospital. He has my mom and my uncle, and he's married to my grandmother still. And a fun fact about the four of them is they were all born in the same hospital in Los Angeles. So a little bit about the history of LA and the Latino community in LA is that it was one of the fastest expanding communities in regards to ethnic diversity. And like I said, I was going to be talking about some of the racism parallels that he had experienced in growing up and then what we're seeing today. So he grew up in a neighborhood called Boyle Heights. His parents were immigrants from Mexico. His dad was born in Jalisco, Mexico, and his mom was born in Aguascalientes, Mexico. And they both came to the United States in the 1920s. My grandfather is one of 10 siblings, and he is the youngest. And the eldest being 18 years older than him. So he had a lot of different siblings that would raise him while his parents were at work. His schooling was one of the most challenging things for him. He was a little bit of a delinquent and got kicked out of parochial school. So it was a little bit of a challenge for him in like his early elementary and then into what we now have as middle school. And one of the biggest things that he kept emphasizing during my interview with him was the inequalities in education. He said that the poor areas in LA would get the poorest schools, and the lack of funds and lack of proper allocation of funding to those poor neighborhoods. And so any child of color was already at a disadvantage in regards to their education just because they were not given the proper resources and good teachers that would actually care about what they're teaching. And he said that the communities were very, very, very segregated. And this is throughout the 1940s and the 50s before the civil rights movement in the 1960s. And he said that it felt like all of the Latino targeted industries like gardeners and housemaids and things like that, they wanted to keep those in the Latino community. Right after the Great Depression, his father actually left to go back to Mexico because he needed more money for his family, and they were not getting any money from the American government anymore. So he went back to Mexico for a little bit. So this is a photo of my grandparents on their wedding day. They were 17 when they got married, which is like kind of unheard of today. But he said to me that thank God your grandmother married me when she did, because otherwise I would have been trapped into this system of like the Latino man that is always charged with crime for no reason. He said he was stopped and frisked many, many times just for simply being a Latino man. He was arrested on multiple accounts because the police needed somebody to blame for various crimes and immediately would turn to community members who were of color. And he said that he saw this like from the time he was 12 all the way until today still, and he's 83 now. He said that the rise of the civil rights movement was something that even more so segregated the communities in Los Angeles. And while there was so much focus on the Black communities in Los Angeles, the Latino communities kind of got left behind. So he wasn't felt like he was being heard, even though they were in the height of all of these movements for those minorities to have the same rights as the white people. He said that more often than not, he was scared for my mom and for his son, my uncle, because they were being raised in the 1960s and 70s, and that they moved from LA to San Diego so that they could build a better life for my mom and my uncle and have it be a little bit more of a safer community. So my paper is really addressing like the similarities between the issues of racism that my grandfather was facing in the 40s and 50s and through the 60s and 70s, and how a lot of those things, he said that it is still an issue today. And all of these things are like, as much as we claim to be a progressive country and California claims to be progressive and liberal, that the issues at the core and the root are still the same. So yeah, here's some more photos of them. And I kind of already touched on like the lack of proper education, the lack of the allocation of resources, and the mistreatment of minorities. And it didn't matter if you were Latino, Asian, Black, like you were not going to be treated the same as white folk, as we can still see today in our like now times. So yeah, that was my presentation and what my paper is focusing on.
Thank you.